Imagine if you were able to watch your great-grandparents tell stories from their lives. What made them laugh? What moved them? How they responded to adversity and triumph? And what impacted their existence? That would be a treasure. Now you can offer that gift to your loved ones. Hello, I'm Dennis Tardon. For more than 45 years, I've been a professional interviewer documenting the lives and times of hundreds of people. I will guide you or your family member through the important stories of your lives using my unique interviewing skills. I'm now offering my legacy interviews worldwide via Zoom from the comfort of you or your loved one's own home. All you need is a webcam, and I will do the rest. Contact me today to schedule your legacy interview.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Outside the Lines, program where we talk about humans, humanity, and the things that define us, and some of the things we think define us. Today on the program, we're going to be talking about music, which is definitely one of the defining things about us humans, is our ability to create music. Now, there are animals that do produce melodies, but these are basically vocalizations that animals use to communicate with each other. I'm sure we've all heard birds singing, or we call it singing. Whales, we say they're singing. And it does sound very musical. But is it music? Probably not. Music is a very deliberate act. Now, music is sometimes referred to as the universal language because almost every culture throughout history, from the beginning of history, has had some form of music, uh, whether it's just banging on a drum or full orchestras or whatever the form. The first musical instrument is actually our vocal cords. Songs, the sound of our voices, we were able to create music from that. But what is music exactly? Well, music is a form of sound, and sound comes from waves in the air that impact our ears, and we translate that into sounds. Uh, but music is a very specific kind of sound. It comes in a very it's a very steady rhythm. It's a very steady um, waves of sound. And we call each iteration of these sounds notes. And we put together these notes to form scores. And we give it a structure. Much like letters, we use letters to form words, to form sentences. We use notes just the same way. We put them together to create a score, to create everything from a simple guitar riff to entire symphonies. And that's the magic of music. And so, to further elucidate our topic, here's somebody who is no stranger to music herself. She is a singer, a wonderful guitar player, and as always, the queen of hair hats, my lovely co-host, Renee Yaworski.
Why, thank you, Manny. Yes. This is a hair hat today. And
Rock
yeah,
the hair hat as always.
yes, David asked to borrow it, and I had to decline. So he's a little miffed at me, but
Oh
that's okay.
no.
He'll get over
Oh,
it. Yeah.
he'll get over it. I'm sure he can find his own. Let him get his own darn hair hat.
He'll let him get his own darn hair hat. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you chose this topic. And of course, and David is the perfect guest because he's such a beautiful musician. He plays piano and guitar, and his voice is the stuff of legends. He has such a pristine, beautiful voice. So I'm glad that he's going to weigh in, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this is going to go. Of course, music has impacted my life, my entire life as well.
Hmm.
So I'm very passionate about this subject, and we're going to get deep, guys.
Yeah, you've mentioned before that you were in a punk band when you were in your misspent youth.
Oh, yes, I was. Yeah, I was the
Yeah,
drummer.
so
It was
so
a
we're
very
definitely going
big
to talk about that.
popular too, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Well, tell you what, let's bring on our guest, ladies and gentlemen, David William Myers.
Hi,
Hi, David.
good to see you guys.
It's good to see you too.
Good to see you.
It's okay. I survived. I survived washing my hair. It was okay.
He got in the shower. He's trying to get all of the ladies all crazy because he just got out of the shower. So,
I heard
Okay.
they like a guy that showers. Apparently, that's
they like him in the shower.
That's the rumor.
You look
And
wonderful.
in the
You
shower
look-
as well. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, you look marvelous, darling. Marvelous.
Yes. Very well put together.
Yes,
Thank
and he's
you.
wearing
Thank you very
he's wearing UGA colors. That's my alma mater colors, the red and black. It looks very beautiful on you. All right, so Manny, get us started.
All right. Well, David, so let's talk about you for a minute. How long have you been making music, and when did you start?
I probably. I mean, my grandfather probably was one. Well, no, you know what? I can go back even further than that. My mom actually used to play a 12 string, and she can't play at all anymore now. But that was when I was a
Oh.
little kid, and I found that interesting. I think I recall like plucking around on it when I was really little. But when I probably around when I turned around 9 or 10, I would go stay with my grandparents, and my grandfather always had a guitar around, and he would try to show me some things, and that probably sparked the interest, but I didn't really get into playing until probably until like the teens, like the grunge era, like the 90s. I was around 14. It's when I
Oh.
got my first electric guitar.
Oh wow.
So, what were your? I mean, besides obviously your folks, so what were your musical influences? I mean, what were you listening to at that age?
At the time that I really got into it, it was the grunge era. I changed. That was when, like you make that transition at some point in your childhood where like, you spend most of your childhood listening to what your parents listen to and you enjoy that stuff.
Mhm.
And then eventually something hits you a little differently and then you change up a little bit. And grunge is what did that for me. And specifically Nirvana is probably what kicked it off the most. And so that got me excited about playing power chords on an electric guitar. I completely ruined that first guitar because I just beat it up so terribly.
So you were blasting out to Smells Like Teen Spirit and all that. I mean, is that what you were trying to jam out?
I never tried to sing during those years at all because I didn't feel like that was something I could ever do.
Oh,
I
Well,
didn't know
I've
that. I
heard
thought
you-
you were singing first. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Like I probably started to dabble with singing a little bit in my 20s but I would lay down it would always be me laying. I never felt like I sounded good out in the room. I would try to lay down a track and then I would just like basically mutilate it in DAW software to try to make it sound like something. And that's because I just wasn't really pushing it right. I didn't, it wasn't really a pandemic is actually when I really started like trying to sing more. And then I was like, I could do this my style. I kind of have this thing going where I could do it like this. This works.
Yeah. So you were self-taught? Did you take any lessons? It was just come naturally to you.
I took at another point in my teens, probably a little bit later, I want to say 16 maybe, I took piano lessons for a very brief while. I basically just got to the point where they start teaching you to play with two hands, and then I quit.
Oh,
The piano also is something that I really didn't play most of my life until probably pandemic. Like that's when I met somebody that played the piano a lot, and I would hang out with her and tinker around and got more familiar with the piano during that time.
do you feel like you've gotten more comfortable playing piano, guitar, singing, all that stuff, or are you still kind of struggling with it?
Oh, it's definitely something I struggle with. I'm not, you guys get everybody gives me like a massive intro. Like I don't practice enough, to be honest. Like when people see me going live, that's when I'm practicing. I hardly ever just sit around lately and just play. If I practice more, I know I'd be fine. But yeah, I'm not super comfortable. It's a continuous struggle while I'm doing it. But
Yeah, I think
just
most of
something I'm
us.
passionate about, really. I don't I s- there's it's really hard for me to like imagine myself as a musician. I consider myself an enthusiast, and I enjoy it's something I enjoy tinkering around with. And I think, and I think it's just because I have a very sort of strict standard in my mind of what makes an actual musician, because I know the people out there that put in the work. And we
Oh
we
boy.
we know them, right? Like the people that are at
Oh
it
yeah.
every day, putting in the
Yeah.
practice, and learning all of the technical skills. And that's never been me. And so I'd feel like a little bit of an ass to call myself a musician in that light,
Well, see, it's funny that you say that, and not in a like haha way.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's interesting that you say that. I think we call that imposter syndrome, where you feel like, what am I doing? I'm not like these
Mhm.
guys. I mean, they're professionals. They do this all the time, so on and so forth. I feel the same way about art. I look at my artwork and I go, this is crap
Yeah.
compared to, you know.
I
But
don't feel
I
like
forget that everybody has their own style, and like you, I'm what I consider myself, an interested amateur, a
yeah.
relatively talented amateur. Um,
I think
but I
it's
never,
just
I
a difference in labels sometimes, because I
right,
don't when I
exactly.
say what I'm saying, I don't feel like I'm downing myself. I love that I have music and that I do what I do, and who
Yeah,
knows,
yeah.
I could do something with it. I don't know, but
Well,
it's not
we,
something I shoot for. I just enjoy
uh,
doing it.
yeah. Well, we've heard you play. We've heard your singing. We've heard your songs. We've heard you play. And as far as I'm concerned, you're a great musician. You
Mhm.
know, knowing absolutely nothing about music myself. Well, a little bit maybe, but uh, and so Renee, you're also a musician, or well, let me back up. Would you even call yourself a musician? After
Yes.
hearing what David said.
Yeah, because I I had to own that early on because I studied music. Like so I studied music at age 2, which was the violin. That's my mother's doing. Okay. So I can't take credit for that. But she had me in the lessons. And then at age 3, I was doing the piano lessons and then, clarinet and all of the other things, and then drum lessons later on. And then the punk band hit like when I
Wow.
was maybe 12 or so, and it was a huge deal. Now, that's not a credit to me, although I do think I was an inventive drummer. If you listen to my tracks from back then, I was a lot of songs we wrote around my drum tracks. So I probably should claim it more than I used to. But a lot of the marketing was really the front man, whose name was Eugene or is Eugene. It was really about him. He's like a Freddie Mercury type personality. He's stunningly attractive. He's really flamboyant and out there. And he just, he got in with Bikini Kill and with Kill Rock Stars and with all of the Seattle grunge K records, I think it was. He got in with Bobcat Goldswaith was always at our shows. He was a big supporter of us, who was a big deal at the time.
Bobcat.
Yeah, I mean, but he was very famous at that time. People forget, and Robin Williams' best friend, and all of those big Beastie Boys were really big at that time out of New York. And then one of them ended
Right.
up marrying Kathleen Hanna from Bikini Kill. And these were entrepreneurs, the Beastie Boys, Bikini Kill, all of these record label people. And even Nirvana, I mean, Kurt Cobain was a huge marketer of Nirvana. He would go and he would do the interviews and pretend to be self-deprecating, but he was the one calling MTV every day saying, play our stuff, play our stuff.
Yeah.
He really wanted to be famous, and he was the reason why Nirvana launched really big. My band was signed. I and the bassist elected to go to college instead, and Eugene determined he did not want to find replacements. He was very punk rock and very loyal. The Ramones were big, Nirvana. You didn't want to like break up the band. So when we broke up the band, he did not move forward because that was like a street cred thing, and that was important to him. For him, it was like a family. But
Right.
I have to call myself a musician because, number one, that opportunity, and I have to give the fans credit. There were a lot of rappers who actually were influenced by us, and grunge musicians. Like there's a girl named Kay Flay who's famous out of Atlanta now, and then there's a rapper that I forget his. Oh gosh. Anyways, but these people came out of that and were listening to our records back in the day. So I have to give that credit because, particularly, like I said, Eugene worked really hard to market this, got all of the business contracts, and we were getting paid. So I was a professional musician for all of those years, and I would not have done it without them. So there's no like ego here. If anything, like he could have done it without me and the bassist. He just chose not to. But then after that, I just kept falling in with the right people. So I'm just going to respect the other people. And we had a lot of radio play in Georgia. I moved to Georgia. I became the front man. I was no Eugene, but I was able to do it. And that's when I started learning the guitar and really perfecting my voice. And just fell in with the right people, like the REM people, the B-52s people. These were all like famous people back in the late
Right.
90s
Yeah. Coming out of
and early 2000s.
that Atlanta sound. Yeah.
All of that. Yeah. And Widespread Panic was big. CeeLo Green came out of that. There are just so many people that came out of that scene. John Mayer came out of that scene. I just was like Forrest Gump. I just kept being in the right place at the right time. And almost like Forrest Gump, not just sort of making myself more ancillary because of what David said. My attitude is like David. I kind of reacted the way David acted. I kind of always felt like, well, I'm not really, a Kurt Cobain, or I'm not really, I always put myself in the background, and my ego wasn't wrapped up in it. It was something that I more got into because my boyfriend was very passionate about it. That was Eugene. He was my boyfriend for 9 years. Anyways, so I sort of, I still feel weird like claiming it, but I do feel like it's weird to not claim it. And David, that's the one piece of advice I would give you, though, is like so many people are impacted by your voice and your instrumentation and your spirit that even though you're not putting in the hours, like, Travis Lohman, who is a friend of the network, he's this composer and he plays piano all day, every day. That's all he does. He's impeccable. Yeah. He claims it and he gets paid for it. And I get it. Like he owns that and he makes that his life. And so I think we do need to give credit to people like that, or the Kurt Cobains or the Eugenes who are like really invested. And so I feel you, David. I really get it. But at a certain point, you have to say, well, I'm affecting change somehow. There's something that I'm doing that's resonating with others. And so at a certain point, like for me, it came down to like respecting the fans and respecting my collaborators who like believed in me, and then just saying, okay, it's not an ego thing. It's like a reality thing. Like they say humility is just being a realist. So like the realist is that you're just very talented, David. So you're representing something that really resonates with other people.
I appreciate that people think so. Yeah, I mean that's a great compliment. Thank you.
Yeah,
Renee, so what was the name of your band? We didn't hear the name of your band.
So the band was called DPW, and that was, again, this is all era stuff. Okay, that was the big deal back then, which was the disgruntled postal workers. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And it was these were 11-year-old kids naming the band, and then it just stuck. I think there were other names too, and we changed our last names to DPW. Like I was Becky DPW for many, even some people still call me that. and it was, but it was a zeitgeist. There were
Right.
other
Yeah.
bands in the area that were sort of taking off, and like I said, people like the Bikini Kill people, and a lot of the what is it? Something Washington, Olympia, Washington was a big hot spot at that time. That you had Calvin Johnson coming out of there with Beat Happening. These names mean a lot to people like from that era. And
Yeah.
I think Rancid was also big at the time. I think it was the
Oh
same
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So the idea, and Eugene was he still is a fabulous songwriter. And what he did was he infused punk, gritty, grungy punk with pop. So
Oh,
these are
cool.
hummable melodies. These are things that get stuck in your head, and they're very hummable. And at the same time, you have the crazy, that type of stuff. But I wasn't into it. And that's the funny thing. David, you were influenced by Nirvana. That was all my boyfriend wanted to listen to. But I didn't like it that much in the beginning. I was like an 11-year-old girl. I was like, what is this?
I mean,
And
and
I had to be
realistically, they started as punk as well, right? Like, I mean, that was
right.
that was
Yeah.
their roots. I think they just, it's just at some point genres kind of become a little skewed, and then it becomes a new genre suddenly. Yeah.
Oh
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think their
Well,
first album was actually a punk album, I think. I don't know if I owned it. I don't even remember what it was called, to be honest.
yeah.
I bet John Duncan knows.
That was
Jonathan,
before I even discovered them, I discovered them
Yeah.
when they hit it big, and they were just played
Right. I mean, yeah.
already mainstream at that point.
Mhm.
When Nevermind came out
Oh
and they
yeah,
started
huge
playing
deal.
"Smells Like Teen Spirit" on the radio of all things, it was like, oh, what
Mhm.
is this? And so I bought the album or the CD actually, and I was like, wow, this is the new sound. This is the new sound of rock and roll.
Yeah.
And then
The
other
grunge
bands
era.
started coming in. Yeah, Audio Slave and Soundgarden, which I think had the same singer. I think Chris Cornell was singing for both.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and groups like that. But also like the Atlanta sound. Love the B-52s. Love
Oh
REM.
yeah, so
All those
good.
guys.
Mhm.
And they all
And
became my friends. That's the thing. Is like they're all like I have all these memories. They were older than I was, but they're such great people. They would like take you under their wings,
Mhm.
and sort of introduce you to all of their friends. And it's just one of those weird things. And now like one of the people I'm closest to in the world right now is like the REM manager. Like he knows everyone because
of course,
REM kind of they shaped the whole culture. They were in early on MTV, and Rock the Vote really is credited to him specifically, which changed the
yeah,
election, which changed world history. Like I'm always telling him, you changed world history, and he's like, there's other people, and I'm like, no, it's him. But really, like all of that, and then Nirvana always said Nirvana was why Nirvana wanted to do something. I mean, REM was why Nirvana wanted to do something. Kurt Cobain was a huge fan. In fact, he bought a house next to Peter Buck in Seattle, who's the guitarist of REM, just to say, I live next to Peter Buck.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal for them. So
yeah.
what I
So
love
that's
about music is music can affect culture is what I wanted to say is you
oh
can use
right,
that
yeah,
as a platform to really change. REM got into with which influenced MTV, sort of the we can affect how people vote. We can affect how people think. So Greenpeace was big at the time, and getting behind women's rights and getting behind civil rights. And I remember Amnesty International, and Save the Whales, and just anything you can think of from that era was
Mhm.
really bands like REM saying, hey, it's cool to be informed, which is
yeah,
something that a lot of bands before that really would not get involved with. I mean, Elvis was the famous one saying, look, I'm not going to weigh in on politics. I'm an entertainer, and, REM comes out and is like, we don't even want you at our concert unless you're against, oil's, Exxon or whatever, or,
Yeah.
so
yeah.
it changes culture. And so I have a lot of respect for
Well, I think it's kind of
entertainers who
cyclical
went out
because
there.
if you look at music from like the 40s and 50s, it's it's really made more for adults. The dance, the dance bands and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. Then it started to change in the 50s with Elvis, and of course he took a lot of his influence from a lot of the black musicians who were playing at the time, you know, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and all those guys, you know, even going back to the Platters, and so forth, you know. But then the '60s came around, and of course we had, you know, the war in Vietnam, and bands were just becoming. That's when they started becoming more politically aware and more about, you know, you started hearing songs. You know, Bob Dylan came on the scene. And then later on, Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, The Doors, and so on and so forth. And they started writing protest songs and songs about the war. We've got Fortunate Son, which I guess is just one of those gems, you know, from
Yeah.
CCR,
Mhm.
which is all about, you know, a highly political song like that. And of course, John Lennon with Imagine and so on and so forth. But then the war ends and it's the '70s, and then we're back to more like kind of more soft rock and, you know, Seals and Crofts and all of those
Mhm.
guys, James Taylor, you know, Jim Croce, uh, and then of course you get the disco era, which is again back to dance music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it started to change again with the punk and the grunge movements.
Yes.
They were
Mhm.
rebelling against all. They were rebelling against,
Well,
you know,
college
corporate.
rock, yeah, college rock
College
right
rock, yeah,
before
college
that,
rock
feeding
started,
into that,
yeah,
yeah.
the
Mhm.
so-called alternative music that wasn't as radio friendly, that wasn't as, you know, that wasn't commercial, uh, or commercial enough to be played on mainstream radio, but they were playing on college radio, and we started getting back to more
Mm.
politically charged music. Um, and you know, I mean, that's the way the pendulum swings. I'm not sure where we're at. I'm not really hip to modern music anymore. You know, uh,
Do
so
you
I don't.
do you guys think that people like society maybe just enjoys a certain like enjoys to experience contrast, and that's not just necessarily with music, you know, it's kind of like when you're really hot, it feels good to go to a really cold environment. When you're
Mhm.
really cold,
Mhm.
you know, but
Right,
even
right, right.
even with music, I think we can, you know, it's like people get too acclimated to something when something has a different edge to it, you know, like you know, I think that is intriguing, and so you kind of get sort of this back and forth sort of
Hmm.
transition in things where people are like, okay, we've
Yeah.
heard enough of that, and this right here is fresh. This is different. They say we
Mhm.
say fresh, but we really know it's not. It's not a lot of things that are entirely fresh, but in that climate, somebody does
Right,
something different from what
right.
everybody's
Yeah,
been used
yeah,
to for a while, and then it's like,
yeah,
okay, this is a
yeah.
direction.
Yeah, I think, you know, now we're going back more. I think more dance pop kind of deal. You know,
Yeah.
and of course, very heavily influenced by hip hop and that genre. Um, so David, can we talk you into maybe providing us with a song? I don't know if you
Um,
have anything ready or
I don't have
just
anything ready. I'm like on the line of if I'm up for it tonight. I took some sinus medication. I've had sinus
oh,
pressure all day.
okay,
So but maybe like I don't know, check with me again before we get off of here. Maybe I'll finish this out
okay, all
after
right,
that.
no problem, no pressure. All right, so we kind of talked about where we started. Now, me, I'm an old fart, so I go back to the '60s and all that area, which is why I know it so well. And but my favorite music, I think, is the '80s, especially synth pop, Brit pop. Man, I love that stuff. You know, Depeche Mode, Pet Shop Boys, you know, all that.
Mhm,
You know, Howard Jones, and U2. Uh, you know, so that's my era
mhm.
of music. Uh, so, what are you both? And I asked this of both David and Renee. So, what are you listening to now? What's your favorite genre? Or who are your favorite artists right now? Start with
I'm
David.
extremely mixed. Like I
Hmm.
just
Mhm.
I've gotten and it only seems to become more so over time. I listen to almost everything, you know. There's maybe some certain certain things I might not listen to as much, but pretty much almost everything. I probably the weird thing is, and I feel like, I don't know why I feel like it's a little bit strange at my age that I'm very inclined to listen to like very modern day pop music. In fact, I might even prefer that over listening to Nirvana now, or like, and go, because I like to hear fresh things. I like to hear stuff that's different, and but I think my taste has changed overall too. Like I appreciate like real. There's a, even now, and a lot of people can say that people say there's like it's losing its soul or something. I think just the nature of creativity is changing. People have different set of tools, but they're doing amazing things. They're just taking it further. And so I really like to see some people go through a process. You got Ed Sheeran really excites me. He's a great songwriter. I specifically like the way that he doesn't even need a band. He can sit there with just his loop station and create an entire backing for himself and perform in front of an entire audience without having anybody playing along with him. And it sounds like a full set when he does that. And that's what got me excited about the music gear that I started to purchase, because I was like, this is a really cool thing that he does. I actually wasn't so much interested in what he had on the radio. It was like, what really got me is when I started to catch videos of him online, like on YouTube, where he was being filmed in a more intimate setting. And I was actually watching him build up this entire song by himself. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a whole different thing. That's really cool. And but other artists too. There's a lot of there's just so many of them that are like really cranking out kind of like hit after hit, Charlie Puth and I mean, I don't know, Sam Smith, and I mean, like just all like a lot of the people that are, and I'm not even naming like some of the latest artists. I've been so prone to listen to all of my music in our community where it's people covering things that I
Me too.
like. But I catch radio. I catch pop radio like when I'm driving to and from work. That's when I like catch it the most, probably.
Yeah. I think that's the problem. I kind of stopped listening to the radio a long time ago, so I'm not listening to it. But so Renee, what about you?
Well, I've been listening to your playlist, Manny.
And he said Billie Eilish.
Yeah, Billy's Eyelash. Yeah.
Billie Eilish. Yeah, I like her. I like Ed Sheeran too.
Let's take a moment to wish Sandy D a
yes,
happy birthday,
thank you. I was trying to get
happy
birthday, Sandy.
Happy birthday, Sandy D. Do we dare do it? Do we sing the song?
There'll be a lag, but we can do it. All right. So let's just do it.
Okay.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Sandy.
Happy birthday
to you. And many more.
We're gonna listen back to that, and there's gonna be such a gap between us. We're gonna.
I know it's gonna be really bad to listen back. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love you, Sandy.
She said thanks. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love Sandy is integral to everything, and we love you, Sandy.
Yeah.
This is your birthday show, Sandy. Yeah, so everything. I mean, Manny's been sending me some cool stuff that I've been listening to, and I love that. That's all different types of genres. I'm like David. I listen to a little bit of everything. I was listening to Miles Davis the other day. Then I listened to like John Denver and James Taylor a lot, and then some jazz, and then like the REM guy. Like he sent me this great thing. It's a compilation of dungeon rap out of Ukraine. There are these teenagers it's called dungeon rap, and it's
I've
these
never even heard of that.
No, you've got to Google it, because here's the thing, like it's all these Ukrainian teenagers who are trying to express the despair that they're feeling, that there's no economy for them, there's no jobs, there's no university for them. And so they have this thing called dungeon rap, and it's a lot of sampling. So they're sampling from famous rap songs and stuff, and then they infuse it with this like ethereal, echoey, sort of grungy experience. And I didn't think I'd like it, but it's kind of interesting. It sounds like a soundtrack. It's something you could put on in the background as you're writing or doing something. And it's actually really interesting. So people should Google that. And I don't remember the names of the independent artists, but there's a compilation you can find on YouTube that's just called Dungeon Rap, and you could put Ukraine in there. That's very cool. But any really little bits of anything throughout the day, no matter like how I feel. But I mean, I think my basic go-to is still kind of oldies. I do think like, like Otis Redding. I love listening to
Mm,
Otis Redding, James Brown type stuff.
mhm.
Anything that would have been famous in like the 60s and 70s. I really should have been born in the 50s because that's really where I would have shined. But and then everything Manny's been sending me, like I said as well, is like front in my mind. And then Phoebe Snow, because Dennis Tardon got me onto Phoebe Snow, and then Manny wrote a song that just so happens to sound like a Phoebe Snow. But more about that
Which I'm
later.
still waiting.
Yes, I
Still
know.
waiting.
I had such a crazy few days. Seriously, I lost a whole day in the vortex of the DMV, and that's a separate story. But
The
I
Oh
really,
wow.
vortex of the, yeah,
you
yeah,
go to the DMV and like you don't know if you'll ever leave or not. It's kind of purgatory.
it
You never
is.
know.
At
Yeah.
least you
Mhm.
can do way more of it online these days. So a lot
You
of
would
times,
think you can some of it, yeah.
mm,
For me,
Yeah.
they said no online
Yeah.
for you, no online. So
aw,
I
No
had to
online
leave.
for you.
that's the worst.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. There was a TV show where the DMV was literally hell.
Are you serious?
There was, yeah,
That's reality, though. I don't know if that's a
yeah.
TV
It,
show. That's
it's
reality.
it's one of the circles of
Like,
hell, I think.
isn't there a Netflix series that the entire show takes place at the DMV or something
Is
like that?
there? Oh
I've
gosh, I could
If
I feel
there
never
like
isn't, there
watch
there's
it. It
should
would
something
be.
like
trigger.
it's not something I watched. I feel like I've seen a preview or
It
something.
would trigger me. It would trigger me. I hate
Yeah.
it. Like it is better than it used to be because you can make an appointment now. But I thought it was funny that Scott Bakula, who's famous from Quantum Leap and he was Captain Archer in Enterprise, whatever. Anyways,
Mhm.
he did his whole Colbert spot, which is like, you get 8 minutes on Colbert. He did the entire spot just complaining about how he had to go to the DMV. That's how
Mhm.
intense this is. Like instead of talking about his acting or any shows, he was like, the DMV for 8 minutes. And I was like, wow, you even got Scott Bakula upset. That's pretty bad. Because he's such a
Yeah.
nice guy.
Oh, I know what I was thinking of. No, actually, there's a show on Prime Video called Parking Wars,
Mhm.
and some of the segments show, parking meter maids, I guess you used to call
Oh
them,
yeah.
putting tickets on people's cars. But then there's a segment where they show people going to have to pay for their fines and then going to the DMV or going to impound and just the hell that they have to go through. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, this is yeah. Oh, Jonathan Duncan is listing off some of his music here. I yeah, I'm very eclectic when it comes to music. I'm all over the place. Back when I used to work at the newspaper, I brought along my a hard disk full of just full of songs, and so I would play it. And the other people loved it because it was like, this is better than listening to the radio because we never know what's going to be next. Is it going to be ABBA? Is it going to be ZZ Top? Is it going to be a classical piece? Is it going to be Sinatra? Is it going to be AC/DC? It's like
I was honestly so glad when streaming music became the norm because
mhm,
those years of collecting CDs and albums and collecting MP3s and just like it's so much to try to hold on to and keep up with and to shuffle around and try to figure out what to
mhm,
do with it. And now you can kind of hone in on something, whatever you're
mhm.
in the mood for at a given moment. And you don't even have to pick the songs necessarily. You can tell it kind of what you're looking for and it just goes with it. It makes life a lot
Right.
easier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what Renee was talking about when she said I send her music. I every now and again I'll send her a playlist of something I've created
Yeah.
on Spotify, some old punk music, some 80s alternative, stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, but I think making it's kind of like the old making mixtapes now to me,
Mhm.
creating a Spotify playlist, and there's an art to it, I think.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's
Just
a little
hoping
off
that
guard.
hoping that the host of the radio show would stop talking, you know, and then you would just catch
Oh,
right at the
press
perfect
play. Yes.
beginning of it, you know, press both
Mhm.
Right.
the
Yes.
play and record buttons at the same time on the
Exactly.
deck. Yeah.
Exactly. See, kids today, they just don't know they don't know the struggle that we had to go through to get our music.
Yeah.
Yeah, really. And it made you appreciate it even more. You know, one of the things I say that was a blessing in disguise back when we were all on vinyl or cassette is you couldn't really, it was such a pain in the ass to forward over the song that you didn't like on the record that you would just you leave it there, and eventually you ended up sometimes liking it better than the hit songs or the songs that you bought the records for. You know,
Yeah.
you were having to be exposed and you were having to listen to it in a sequential order,
Yeah.
which
Right.
brought you through that mood. I mean, I can't imagine Beatles records without that feel of they're really taking you on this journey. And I think there's something to be said from that. And I know that vinyl is surging again. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe that'll catch on as well. But you're right. The Spotify playlists really is like John Duncan. It is kind of like that mixtape feel. Like you can say to somebody, here are bands that you've heard of some of them, but then there's some in there that you've never heard of before, and it can sort of open new doors for you.
Right. And
You know,
can
I think
find
you said something pretty interesting there about, you know, how like it sort of like listening to a tape, for instance, or, you know, like you were forced to sort of like kind of either sit through something or like try to just keep hitting the rewind button and then nope, still not over. I mean, fast forward button.
Yeah.
And so like we were a lot more likely to just sort of, you know, like sit and absorb something and then maybe develop an appreciation for it. And now we are now in sort of this instant gratification kind of society where, you know, it's like that's not what you want in a moment. One click, you're on to the next thing, you know. So that probably did change change the industry, but also just the way people appreciate music a lot differently now, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those tracks that we used to skip over, now we call them deep cuts. Those are the deep cuts. Those are the songs that aren't played on the radio, but that are still good. You know, but they just didn't make it as singles. And sometimes, just like Renee said, sometimes those are even better than the ones that did make it on the radio.
You guys remember the hidden tracks that some artists would put at the end of their albums?
Yeah, that was so cool. I used to love those.
I had Nirvana's Nevermind album for so long before I realized that was there. And what it was is I went to sleep listening to it one night, and like I don't, just the way that it was a very repetitive kind of very different from the rest of Nevermind, and kind of almost creepy. And it was like, I want to say there was like a 15-minute gap before it starts or something. And I'd already been lulled into a sleep. And I remember the hairs on the back of my neck standing up and like sitting up in bed, like, what is that? You know?
Yeah, that happened to me and my girlfriend, Sarah. We were listening to REM's, remember, this is pre-internet, kids. So we couldn't like fact check anything. You had to just guess everything. And I remember we were listening to REM's Green when it came out, and if there's a hidden track at the end, you know, and we just looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, like we thought it was supernatural. Like we thought we were the only ones hearing it. We really did. We were like, oh my gosh, maybe this is a message, or it was, you know,
yeah.
We were very little. We were like 10 or I don't know, but it was just very funny. So, and nowadays I think with the internet, some of that gets ruined, because another thing that was cool is like the bands that didn't publish their lyrics. It was so cool because you have to guess what the lyrics are, and there's no internet to sort of explain it to you. Oh, I wanted to know I wanted to say I'm listening to Rodriguez a lot. I don't know if you guys have heard Rodriguez, but he made these two records out of Detroit in 1970 and 1971. And nobody in America heard them or bought them. And so there was some weird, dodgy legal things that happened that are probably criminal, but they still can't figure out what happened. They sent them to Australia. So JD, I want to know if you've heard of Rodriguez. I bet he has. They were sent to Australia and South Africa. and and they outsold the Beatles, they outsold the Stones, they outsold Elvis. And in fact, those two records became the voice of anti-apartheid. So they kind of helped bring upon anti-apartheid. And they assumed in those two countries, in some parts of Europe, that everybody knew about him because this is pre-internet. And
Right,
America had no idea. And these journalists in 2012, was it? No, they made Searching for Sugar Man is the documentary. It won an Oscar. But they found him. Everybody thought in the world that he actually was dead, so no one was looking for him. He never got any royalties, by the way, but he did sell. I mean, he went platinum in one country, he went gold in another, and he's the voice of those generations. Yeah, see, here he goes. JD said Rodriguez is huge in Australia, but no one in America has heard him, and he didn't know he was famous. He spent 30 years as a laborer. He gave up on his music dream. He gave up on everything. And then in his elder years, these journalists from abroad, when the internet came down, they used the internet. They found one of his daughters. The daughter said, I know that guy. That's my dad. He's not famous. And they're like, wait till he gets on a plane and goes overseas. And he did. And he toured the world in his elder years, and he got to see his impact. And then he just died a few weeks ago, actually, at age 81.
So he was entirely unaware that he was famous
for 30 years, and he never got $1 from it, except for when he was old. That's
so weird.
Yeah, but he's huge. He's like Elvis over there. He's like Bob Dylan. And so I said, what is this? Tom Cheshire also watched the documentary. So his two records they're free on YouTube. I highly recommend that people listen to it. It is kind of like Bob Dylan, but it's a little bit more acerbic, anti-establishment. It's very political sometimes, and then it's also very beautiful and very sorrowful sometimes. He had an interesting life. He's a Mexican-American who grew up in Detroit. He was a street kid. He was a busker. And he's got one of the most beautiful voices you'll ever hear. And he writes some of the most outrageously innovative lyrics you'll ever hear. He is like a Bob Dylan or a Leonard Cohen. And people like JD were able to grow up and know him as a Bob Dylan. And Americans still till today are trying to learn.
Wow. Yeah.
I'll send it to you guys so you guys can listen. I'll send you some links to listen to. So that's been on a loop in everywhere I am. I'm always listening to Rodriguez now.
Cool. Well, see, this is not just entertaining. It's informative as well.
It's a mixtape. I'm giving you guys. We're giving each other ideas. Yeah.
We didn't fast forward past it at all.
No, we didn't. We didn't pick up the needle. You have to pick up the needle. And I also remember my dad. This is another cool thing that kids today don't know. My dad having the records on and then telling me not to jump, not to jostle, because I'm a kid and I'm jumping and it jostles the record. It would skip the record.
You scratch the record. Yeah.
Right. Oh, so a lot of my childhood is my dad being like, Becky, stop it.
Well,
because I'm jumping.
That's what started the trend of DJing and
Oh, scratching.
Yeah, exactly.
It's sort of like punk music in itself, where it's like somebody was like, I don't care if I'm ruining Dad's records. It's fine.
Fine. Whatever. We're gonna scratch this sucker.
Yeah, and somebody said, I
drop
remember
the beat.
And somebody just said, I remember how vinyl tasted. I remember the smell of remember the oil that you would use to sort of clean I still remember that smell like so well.
I never got into the maintenance side of that. I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Yeah, you got to maintain it, David.
Like I grew up around them, but I never owned any. But yeah, that was I don't recall anybody ever using anything on them.
Yeah, you gotta like, you polish it, I guess, because it gets like there's little dust that gets in there and it can impede the quality of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Ralphie's here. Hi, Ralphie.
Hey.
Sorry.
But that's one of the fun things about listening to old records is that crackle, all that crackle pop, of the
Well, and it's so interesting that
You
people
know?
are recreating that sound now in modern music, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
intentionally putting it in modern music. It's like an
yeah,
effect that
yeah.
people add
Yeah,
now.
right, right. Well,
If
it's
you
like
listen
it's like
to,
videos where they
yeah,
actually put in the grain and the dirt and
Yeah.
everything,
mhm,
like distressing.
like a
So
filter,
like
yeah.
like Tarantino, like the
Mhm,
Grindhouse movies where they like made it look
Right.
like the old school.
Like
Yeah,
the old
yeah. That's
70s, like some
it's
old
mhm.
funny that
70s film.
we go back to our roots in that, like, because it is nostalgic for people, and there
It
is something
is.
good about it. Something,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
if you
I mean,
listen to
it's
the
something.
Ukrainian dungeon rap, it's all these pops, so I know that they're using something to make it sound like it's analog, even though it's not.
Mm.
And these are teenage kids, and so you're saying, wow, they have respect for the warmth of that analog feel.
Mhm.
Even in the grunge era, I recall a lot of bands using that effect that sounded like they were talking into like a telephone headset or something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Manny, I cut you off like 5 times in a row. Please say something. I feel so bad about it. I was so
No,
dungeon
no, 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 no.
rapping. Sorry.
Dungeon rap.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I made the point about using the filters, the sort of, I guess, talking about grunge, the dirt filters and so on modern on films to give it that old school look, and I think part of it too, it's like what David said, it's nostalgia
Mhm.
for our memories of watching these movies and things and all the little flaws. Oh, I know what I was going to say, and it's something that Renee had said on other shows, talking about about flaws and about how we sometimes actually prefer the flaws to to the uh, to the pristine. You know, uh, I mean, yeah, you can listen to a CD, you can listen to or whatever, modern music, and it's flawless and pristine. You hear every note and everything,
Mhm.
but then you go back to vinyl, where maybe you're not getting every note, but still there is a certain warmth to it, you
Mhm.
know, and maybe it is just nostalgia, but I think yeah, I mean, I know I always enjoyed the sound of vinyl, uh, you know, for its own sake, for that kind of little crackly sound to it. I mean, there's something
Mhm.
kind of ASMR about it,
I feel like
listening to that sound.
to some extent it's almost like if you achieve, like a what some people might consider like perfection, like after a while you end up with sort of like a cookie cutter situation, and
Yeah.
Hmm.
it is the imperfections and things that give them character and make them special, and then I mean that goes for people too, right?
Hmm.
Like if just it's just sometimes just those little quirky differences that we have that make us special, and it's the same with music, I think. Just sometimes like a you take sometimes there are moments in emotional songs where somebody's hitting a certain note and
Yeah.
then and their voice cracks just a little bit
Hmm.
at like an emotional high,
Hmm.
just completely wrecks you because that you
Oh,
feel the emotion in that more than you would
right.
if they just hit
Absolutely.
that note perfectly clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a song, speaking of that, there's a song by Brandy Carlisle, The Story, where at one point her voice cracks, she's going into the chorus. And you're right, it just hits you because
Mhm.
you're going on this journey with them with the song, and then all of a sudden there's this emotional moment, where the singer, uh, and it may be accidental, and I mean, they could easily go back and redo the track, but then they listen to it, and it's like, no, wait, that there's something about
Leave it.
that
Leave it.
little that little imperfect moment, you know. There's a song Billy Joel sings where he kind of stumbles over the words, and he even laughs. You hear him laughing because he catches himself, but
Yeah.
it's still in it's in the released version. They kept it in
Mhm.
rather than cutting it out.
Mhm.
Uh, and you remember those things because there's an honesty to that, where they're saying, yeah, we could have made this perfect. I could have gone back and re-recorded it and made it flawless, but there's something much more human about
Yeah.
that version, you
Yeah.
know. and something much more relatable, where you're listening to it like, oh, they goofed up there, but you know what? You don't care. It sounds cool, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And it's much more authentic too. And a lot of times, like you're saying, and it just brings people, I think it also makes people be able to relate a little bit more. There's nothing more irritating than somebody who's always getting everything right. I mean, it's kind of annoying, right? You feel like you
Yeah.
can't relate. It's like, yeah, okay, you did it perfectly again. Wonderful, and it's like you can't relate to that person. Whereas as
Mhm.
if there's somebody who's a little scruffy, if you look at any beloved protagonist, they always have, I mean, think of a Columbo, right? Where he's, in the trench coat and he's kind of scratching his head and he's with the cigar and you just love
One more
him.
thing. Let me ask
Yeah,
you
right,
one more
right.
thing.
I mean,
Yes, do the thing. Yes. Sorry, David.
on exactly exactly the same direction that you're going. That's so true, because I mean, just imagine, like, pretty much any celebrity that you see in an interview, are they not the most like endearing when they share with you their struggles through the process or something, or embarrassing moments, or like, that's when you're like, okay, now we're really getting to know a real person here. Like, and then like, that makes you love somebody a little
Mhm.
bit more. Whereas if somebody came on and they were just like 100% professional and like, I don't ever mess up and this is all easy peasy, like, I just go on and do my thing. But when people take the time and like, they share with you that human process that we, like, all of us experience in our daily lives, and you're like, this is relatable. This is somebody just like me that just happens to be doing music, and people know of them, they're famous, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, David's the one who cracked this code for me, because I asked David on one of the other shows. I was just sort of musing aloud and I mentioned how people are so much nicer to me when I'm wearing like a crappy old hoodie that's got like, and David was the one was like, yeah, because you're approachable, otherwise you always look so fucking put together. It's like, who wants to, no one can relate to that. David was the one who told me that. So I think it's the same thing with music. David, don't you think it's like sort of on the same
Yeah,
trajectory?
I mean, it just probably the human experience in general, and sometimes maybe it's just our current circumstance that makes a difference too. But like, if you're out and about and you're, grunging it up in a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, and you're around somebody's like dressed up in a business suit, you might not
Mhm.
really feel like that feels like the most approachable situation, or
Right.
like, or but yeah, like, when it just it does, like, our sometimes being too professional in some settings is, I think that's why it's important to sort of denote for us in a society that like, okay, this is a casual setting. We can go here and we
Mhm.
can just relax, because it makes a difference in how we respond to each other,
Right.
I think.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
Mhm. Yep,
Kind of like
we
like
almost
going to a fancy restaurant where
yeah.
it's fine dining and everybody's dressed nicely, and you're suddenly you feel intimidated, and it's like,
Mhm.
ooh, I need to mind my p's and q's, and as opposed to going to a up up Outback Steakhouse or something,
Right.
or
I mean, and
Texas Roadhouse.
there's the
Mhm.
flip side of
Uh,
that too. If you're going into that fancy restaurant and you happen to just be wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt,
oh yeah,
like
yeah.
the way other people are like,
Right.
Yeah.
all right,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think you know where you're at, pal.
I'm sorry.
We're
Who let the riffraff in?
Right.
That happened to me once in Macon, Georgia, when I was 18 years old, when there was a very fancy restaurant and we were not prepared. My friends and I were dressed really not cool, and they let us know by just not seating us. And eventually we got the hint. Okay, we don't want
That's
to.
terrible.
Yeah, it was really terrible. David, because Burn It Down is coming on right after this. This might be our
Mm.
last opportunity. If you did want to play a song live, you could play us out. And if not, no pressure.
Yeah, I think I'll skip that tonight. I'm just I am dealing with the sinus thing, and I
Okay.
don't think I was really prepared to tonight for that. But it's definitely been fun hanging out with you guys and just talking.
Oh,
Yeah,
same here.
absolutely.
Same here. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
everybody can check you out. I mean, you play on Socially Distant Fest and all of that, and is there any links or anything you want to tell people about
Yeah,
where they can
give us your deets.
give us your
And
deets,
maybe just
David?
people can just add me as a friend or follow me on my Facebook account. That's pretty much all I do. And I'm good
All
with
right.
that.
All
Okay,
right, that sounds
cool.
really good. Yeah, and so I
Awesome.
want to encourage everyone to just don't change that channel. We have Julio Morales as the guest on Burn It Down tonight, so it's going to be a special edition. It's going to be so
Julio.
cool. It's 3 friends.
Awesome.
Tom Cheshire, of course, in Puerto Rico, which I still can't say it. I'm sorry, I'm a gringa. I will learn eventually how to say Puerto Rico. Manny, you say it. You know how to roll your R's.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. I cannot.
It's
PR.
not Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. He's in
It's
Puerto
Puerto
Rico. I can say Cuba. I can say Haiti. I can say all the other places.
Can you say
Anyways,
Cuba Libre?
Cuba Libre.
See, there you go.
See, I did it. I did, guys.
Chupacabra.
Hey,
Hey, all right.
like a native.
And happy birthday again to Sandy. We
And
love
happy birthday
you.
again to Sandy. Han, good to see you.
Love Pam.
We'll be joining you in a few weeks on Improv Night, which I'm very excited to do. You and then of course Renee as well. We'll all be improving the heck out of something. So, and yes, David, you wanted to say something?
Oh no, I said that'll be fun.
Yeah, it sure will. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Thank you again to David William Myers, our special guest, and to my always delightful co-host, Renee Yaworski. And we'll see you all on the flip side. So, have a good evening.